In this video, we're going to take some features that have been made in ArcGIS Pro and export them into a CAD format data that we can open and use eventually for purposes like drafting or modeling or illustrating outside of ArcGIS. What I have here is a project based on the Washington Heights Armed Forces residential camp north of Shibuya in post-war Japan. And this was demolished largely for the 1964 Olympic stadiums and later for Yoyogi Park. I have in my map layers some rail lines that are traced on existing rail lines. I have some water polygons surrounding a water feature. I have, say, some roads, but mostly some footprints of buildings here. This is primarily what I'm interested in. So I'm going to export this set by going into my databases, my GDB for this scene, right-clicking, and I'm going to export feature classes to CAD. I can choose which features I want. In this case, I'm going to pick just the footprint of the building. And I'm going into an AutoCAD file. And for my purposes, DWG 2018 should work perfectly well. If I was bringing it into a program that wasn't often updating its AutoCAD reader, I might want to go back to an earlier version of the DWG file format. But in this case, I'm going to be bringing it into AutoCAD. So DWG version 2018 is fine. I'm working, I think, at AutoCAD 2022 in this case. My output file is going to be in my same documents folder. In fact, I'm going to change that location and just put it on I'm going to put it in the same folder that I have been uploading my aerial image from. It's Washington Heights VCL demo. Let's call this CAD export. Now, the reason I'm going to go to CAD in my case is I want to use these footprints further downstream in other modeling programs to make extrusions and to build some model representation of Washington Heights. And the CAD format DWG is a highly portable interchange format, so it's going to serve me well in taking data that is coming from the ArcGIS ecosystem, which is fairly closed, arguably, and make it transportable and useful in many other applications. Eventually, I'm going to bring these footprints into SketchUp, and I'll do some modeling in SketchUp in later tutorials showing how I can give these buildings height and more detail there. So let me go ahead and run that command, and it's exporting. And if I were now to, say, open AutoCAD, and let me open that file here, CAD export. It prompts me that it was saved by a third-party file format. That's perfectly fine. Let me open up my layer properties and change the color of the footprint layer to make this a little bit easier to read. And here we have our footprints. They exist as polylines in CAD format that came from polygons in ArcGIS format. They are queryable, movable, editable, transportable in many ways. So I will eventually be taking this DWG file and bringing it into another modeler. Though what we could do here, you can begin to see some of the irregularities in how I traced out my buildings, and that's because when I was tracing the features, I was using an aerial image with very low resolution. It was challenging to understand exactly what was happening with the buildings. So I might want to do some cleanup here and rationalize these lengths and widths. Right now, these are very strange shapes. These are not all the same size by any means, even if the buildings were likely built to the same size. For instance, this row of buildings was likely the exact same specification, but we can see here they're traced at very different sizes. So I may, depending on my workflow, want to take some time here in CAD and kind of reposition, resize, update in some way this data based on the coordinates I have, but based on a more unified system of typologies of buildings in the case of these footprints. But regardless, we've now managed to extract from that aerial image usable footprints that I can bring into many other applications to help tell the story and study the history of this neighborhood.